to May 2024, which is question 1A, anything goes question. Anything goes Microfinance Bank Limited. Okay. So a long read again, quite a long read. So we don't have time on the call to go through this long narrative. But you have the question, so I believe you've gone through it. So the question, the A part of the question requires us to discuss the key features needed in an audit report, which should include in the proposal for audit services of Anything Goes Bank Limited, a whopping 10 marks. So just the A part tested reporting. And you'll see that the question requires every candidate to move beyond the technical components like the address or date and discuss the fundamental concept and communication principles that make an audit report valuable and relevant to the management of Anything Goes Bank Limited. And the proposal should emphasize what makes the final report very useful to management. So you see that this communication is between you and an external party. So it has nothing to do with a memo. You don't need to provide a memo for this. Take note of that. But if you are communicating to maybe an internal circle of maybe your audit partners or audit superiors, yeah, a memo should suffice. You may not be expressly asked to provide a memo, but when you see in a scenario, you're supposed to communicate with those within your audit circle, maybe between the audit manager and the engagement partner, maybe between the audit senior and the audit manager. A memo is fine, even if you are not asked for that. So take note of that on that exam condition. Okay, so
Sorry,
from this
sir,
question,
can I
yes,
ask
please,
a question quickly?
interject. Yes, interject freely. Please go ahead.
Well, this memo communication you're talking about, what
Yes,
if
please.
you are the audit manager and you need to communicate with your audit team who are your junior?
No. A memo
use...
A memo is not. You are their superior, so there's no need.
Okay.
You don't need to write a memo to your junior. There's no need for that. In our office, we don't write memos to our junior. You just send a mail or you communicate, do this. So it's instructive. But to somebody above, you have to be constructive and respectful. That's what the memo speaks to. An official. All right. Thank you for interjecting. So please interject freely if a thought strikes or I say something that you don't want to forget. Please stop me like G did and let's clarify your thoughts. Okay. So let's go to the question, and you generally observe if you've gone through the case scenario, the long read actually, you observe from the question there is this overall focus. And the question's focus tests our knowledge of fundamental principles of communication by the auditor, specifically what guides an audit report, the audit report's value and credibility. That's what the question is all about. So it requires us to think like a professional, drafting a proposal that highlights the quality and meaning of a final product or the final product of the auditor, which is a report. After all the work is done, your final product as the auditor is to provide a report. So that's the overall focus of this question. And the key insight, I would share some thoughts on key insights, is that the question asks for features needed in an audit report that should be included in the proposal. So this means our answer must detail the essential conventions and content of a standard audit report. And if you want to apply an ISA to this, you could apply the ISA 700 series, 700, 702, 705, anyone that resonates with you, provides the essential conventions and content of a standard audit report. If you add ISAs and they are correct to this, your submissions, they provide professional credibility that you know what you're doing. So please try to see how to integrate ISAs. That doesn't mean if you don't add ISAs, you will not pass. You will pass, but then it's good to add them up. Another observation is the examiner's feedback. Let's go to the examiner's feedback. Let's hear what he has to say briefly. 100% of candidates, of course, question one is, so everybody has to attempt it. You have no choice. but performance was below average. Okay, so performance was below average because candidates failed to explain the key features of a report. The concepts around true and fair view, I'm sure, materiality, independence, and I think he said the components to be the functions of the. So candidates were instead focusing on generic structural points. All right. Okay, so we have 10 marks for 10 points. So you should, if you see 10 marks, at least you should be able to provide 10 points, maybe under different sentences to emphasize the need for broad coverage of the report's conceptual foundation. So those are my general observations. Now let's get to the nitty-gritties on how to address this question. So going back to the answers, it's a whooping 10 mark. Over scrolled now, pardon me. Okay, so now getting back to the question, the required, what do we write and how do we write this? The required response is a discussion. We are supposed to discuss some of the concepts that define the auditor's work and his final product, which is the report. So what do you write? Let's look at the conceptual pillars. The conceptual pillars, I mean, your answer must cover the following areas of an audit report. Number one is the scope and responsibility. You need to define the limits of the auditor. That is auditors versus management's responsibility, and the scope is defined in an engagement letter. So the scope and responsibility is very important. It's a conceptual pillar that your thoughts and submissions should provide. Number two is credibility. Explain the concept of independence and true and fair view in your submission. Credibility. Number three is threshold. Explain the application of materiality. Very important, materiality. Number four is key communication. Explain the role of key audit matters, especially relevant for a new commercial bank like Anything Goes Bank Limited, attracting foreign investment. So key communication is very important in what to write. How do you write that? The discussion should be contextual. So for each point, use a concise paragraph, maybe 2 or 3 lines to define the future and briefly explain its significance to Anything Goes Bank Limited. So a bank transitioning to commercial status and seeking foreign investors. So for example, around materiality, state that the opinion is given in all material aspects or respects. Explain that the materiality concept means the auditor focuses effort on significant areas like complex financial instruments, mostly for banks, around the IFRS 9 issues mentioned in the case, and to ensure the financial statement do not mislead users of the same. This is very important in writing. So, looking at a lot of information the examiner has provided, you need to share your thoughts and structure your answers very logically, and making sure you provide your submissions not in one full long sentence, but try to use numbered list, bullet list, stop here, provide your thoughts again. Structure your answers like this, headers and subheaders, so that your story can be followed through and your marks can be awarded very seamlessly. This is very important to note. A lot of people have good answers, but their presentation is the challenge. Examiners may find it hard to follow through their thoughts. So please make your presentation readable and make it very structured, comprehensive and presentable, articulate, so that the examiner can follow your thoughts practically. All right, so general strategies for earning the marks. Try to address the stakeholders. So your report, the audit report must address the concerns of Anything Goes Bank Limited management. So their concerns are around transitioning to a commercial bank. They need early reporting. They need to attract investors. So those are their concerns. So you need to address their concerns in your report. And the report features should be framed as beneficial to them. So for example, independence gives them credibility. Key audit matters offers transparency. So what is beneficial to them should be stated, and that will help address their concerns. So address the stakeholders of Anything Goes Bank Limited. Number two is avoid the exception gap. What do I mean? clearly define the auditor's responsibility and management's responsibility. That's how to avoid the exception gap. So to manage that exception gap, which is also the expectation gap, the auditor is to express an opinion. The opinion is not a guarantee. So management prepares management is responsible for the preparation of the financial statement. So that expectation gap should be avoided, very importantly. Auditors don't prepare financial statements or accounts. They only express an opinion, which is not a guarantee. So that should be submitted in your thoughts or your answers. Also, another strategy is use specific concepts, terms, like I always overemphasize. Use terms like true and fair view, fairly presented fairly in all material respects, independence and objectivity, key audit matters, ISA 700, ISA 701, ISA 702, ISA 7. These key specific concepts integrated into your answers shows you know what you are doing, you know what you are saying. Don't just write generic and non-audit language. Please use these key terms. And by now you'll have practice, not just reading, but your practice involves writing and reading the answers to yourself. Writing and reading the answers to yourself and comparing it with what is on the Pathfinder. That should be what is your focus by now. All right, so let's go and resolidify some of our understanding from the marking key and see how to speak to some of those concepts again so that we can remember. So from the marking key now, we are to achieve 10 marks. So we should cover 10 distinct, well-explained points. So try to focus on core meaning and also implications of each section. So let's go over it again. I don't think you'll be bored because it's good to go over these things again so that we can remember. Number one is the independent opinion. The report provides an opinion-based or opinion. It provides an opinion of the auditor based on his independence and objectivity. So ensuring the opinion is unbiased, that objectivity is necessary. So the opinion has to be unbiased and credible to foreign investors. So that independent opinion is one of the points you should, or your submissions to earn a point very clearly. Number two on this report is around the thoughts of true and fair view and the fair presentation of the financial statements. So the auditor's opinion affirms that the financial statements are prepared according to the relevant IFRS or the framework. Maybe it's in the US GAAP. But in our context, is the IFRS required for a commercial bank, and it contains no undue bias. That's what it means for it to be fairly presented and should have a true and fair view. So that's the second point. Number three is the materiality concept. That opinion of the report is on whether the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. So the opinion assures users that the auditor focused on the most significant items, high risk areas. So for this bank now, like bad loans, non-performing loans, and complex financial instrument mentioned in the case, the auditor focused on that. So the materiality concept should be explained clearly. Number four is management's responsibility. The report should state clearly that management, which is the director or the directors, are responsible for preparing the financial statements and implementing internal controls, which is crucial for anything goes bank limited, given its, from the case, its weak corporate governance and IT capacity issues. So management is responsible for this. Take note of that. Number five is the auditor's responsibility. The auditor's report details the auditor's role, which is simple or simply to express an opinion based on evidence gathered or sufficient appropriate evidence, any way you want to put it. And the auditor's responsibility is not to certify correctness, take note of it, or guarantee the detection of all fraud. No, it's to express an opinion based on evidence he has gathered. So that's the auditor's responsibility. You need to submit your thoughts clearly. The number 6 point is the scope and basis of opinion. So the report confirms the audit was conducted in accordance with ISAs, of course, and this lends credibility to the audit process. Number 7 is key audit matters. You could reference ISA 701. So for a bank seeking global acclamation, this section of key audit matters highlight areas of highest assessed risks. So for example, in this case now, we have the financial instrument complexity or rising non-performing loans, or you could call it bad loans. This enhances transparency for auditors that, oh, these key audit matters are pinpointed and they are materially stated. They are not pervasive. Number 8 is going concern. The audit report should explicitly include management's conclusion on the entity's ability to continue in perpetuity or continue as a going concern. So a critical disclosure for a commercial bank undergoing transition is very important. Then number 9, your thoughts could submit reporting on other information. So the report could cover any other areas, director's report, sustainability. This is to ensure consistency with the audited financial statements. Number 10, the unmodified or modified opinion area. So the report should clearly communicate whether the opinion is unmodified. When you talk of an unmodified opinion, you're talking of a clean opinion or an unqualified opinion. Or the report should state it's modified. Either it's qualified or it's an adverse or a disclaimer. So modified opinion is either a clean report or an unqualified report, in simple terms. Then a modified opinion means it's either qualified or an adverse opinion is provided or a disclaimer of opinion. So this is providing that the ultimate summary judgment on the statement's reliability has been submitted. So that's the 10th point. And if you provide 9 of these thoughts, you should be able to earn the 10 marks very seamlessly. This is very important. All right. So that's it for question 1 on May 2024. Do we have any questions? So that we can rush to the next question. Any questions, contributions? It's only G that has been engaging. So please share your thoughts freely. It's a podcast anyway, but then you're allowed to join because you may have some concerns. That's why I would have just done the podcast myself, like I did for chapter 13, chapter 12, and I think those are the 2 podcasts I've done. So please, freely share, freely interject, and let's address any concerns you have. All right. So, May 2024, Moonshine Limited, question 3, tested reporting. Okay. Not quite a long read, but then we don't have time. It's already 9:23. So let's see how to address the requirements. So number 1, we're required to discuss the principal matters relevant to forming an appropriate opinion on the financial statements of Moonshine for the year ended at 1st December 2020, which is 8 marks. Then we are to evaluate the suitability of Richard's draft extract, 2 marks. So 10 marks for this first part, which is A part of the question. Then we have another B part, and we're required to advise if the audit opinion should be unmodified, which is if it's to be clean or it should be unqualified. And if it's so, should the report contain a material uncertainty related to going concern paragraph? We have to advise, 3 marks. And number 2 part of this B question is discuss the form and content of a modified auditor's report, 7 marks. So we have 10 marks for the A aspect. We have another 10 marks for the B aspect. So he splitted the marks. So please read through the scenario, or you read the question first, then go to the scenario to see what to pick to address the question. Okay, so whichever method you use, fine. But then let's look at this question. It's a 2-way part test covering ISA 705. And ISA 705 is on modified opinions. So in answering questions or in your practice session, try to see which audit standard covers this question. It's a good way to practice. It's a good way to revise. Which audit standard addresses this question? So most of you have WhatsApp, and there's an AI on WhatsApp. You don't have to open your textbook. So just go to Meta AI. Type Meta on your WhatsApp phones. All of us have Android phones, and virtually everybody's on WhatsApp. If not, you won't be on this call. Go to WhatsApp, type on Meta AI. As you're practicing this kind of question, you don't need to open your study text or your slide or whatever. Just type on Meta AI, which question addresses modified opinions. And you see that this AI will give you replete thoughts. So you use your phones as you are reading, and you use it to address 1 or 2 things. Please use this Meta AI. It helps you. because you are in injury time. You don't have time to go through volume now. What you need is value and specifics, strategic reading. So most of these questions, as you are practicing, try to integrate which standard addresses each question. And you have AI at the back of your hand to help you. Like the CEO of Microsoft said, artificial intelligence has come to help us do much with less that we have. So please leverage these things. It's in your phone. So check on WhatsApp. You just see, type Meta AI in your chat or your messages to different people, your friends. Just type Meta AI to come up. Just say, hi, please help me with ISA 705, whatever it is. It will explain it. And if you give it the prompt and say, make it comprehensive, let me understand, you'll be surprised at what that would do for you. So in answering these questions or in tackling such questions, I was saying that the ISAs to each question, try to know which ISAs apply to a question so that if you can integrate it in your answers, perfect. You just glean the marks very practically and seamlessly or very easily. Okay, so let's look at this question now. It's a two-part test covering ISA 705, modified opinions. Part A focuses on a severe scope limitation, and it could result in disclaimer of opinion. I think we'll look at the answer. And part B tests the concept of contingent liabilities based on IAS 37, which is the accounting standard, and ISA 540, which is the auditing standard. And you see that the appropriate use of material uncertainty related to going concern paragraph based on ISA 570 is what this question was testing practically. So generally, you observe that the overall focus of this question tests the auditor's judgment on when and how to modify the opinion or the audit opinion. It also requires applying the material versus pervasive concept. You observe that from the question. So the part A, speaking to scope limited or scope limitation or disclaimer of opinion, the key issue, if you read through the scenario, is the CEO absconding with the company's records, which is a pervasive and a material limitation of scope. So there's no even records to work with. Stating, you see that stated earlier in the year. So when there's a material and a pervasive issue, your answer or your submission leads to a disclaimer of opinion, and it requires detailing the extent of the records missing. So that's my general observation of the part A. Then for the part B, the part B speaks to contingent liability or going concern, and it tests two distinct reporting concepts. So our submission should advise an unmodified opinion because the contingent liability is actually adequately disclosed, and the probability of outflow of funds is relatively low. So crucially, the answer or your answer should correctly advise against using the material uncertainty related to going concern paragraph because the company has sufficient cash. If we even look through the case, I've read through it, meaning the claim does not threaten its continuation or its sustainability. So we'll speak to the case, we'll look at it, but those are just my general observations. And before we come to the answer, let's look at the examiner's report. Let's hear what he said. So the examiner said there was above average, okay, above average performance, but they said the candidate displayed poor knowledge of how to form an audit opinion and modification of audit reports based on circumstances of the client. So the challenge now for students is the lack of understanding of basis for different opinions or and the nuances of report modification. That's the challenge. So take note of it and try to solidify your understanding of what the examiner said in his report. Okay, so let's go to the nitty-gritties. Let's get to work. Let's see how to answer, what to answer, how to go about such questions. All right, so for the A part, the first Roman numeral 1A part of the question, we're to discuss matters relevant to forming an opinion, and we have 8 marks for that prompt. So what do you write? Please focus on the impact of the missing records scattered away by the CEO. Focus on the impact. And you see that this is a severe limitation on scope because there's nothing to work with. So the discussion must revolve around the inability to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence and also the resulting pervasive nature of the problem that could lead to a disclaimer. That's what you should write. How do you write it? Use, like you've seen the examiner provided, use 4 distinct points, and you have 2 marks for each. Number 1, identify the issue as a limitation of scope based on the standard that guides us, ISA 705. Number 2, assess pervasiveness. And pervasiveness you're assessing here is, you could say that since records are missing from April, early in the year, and cannot be reconstructed, the scope limitation affects a substantial portion of the account around the income statement and the SFP. So you see that from the case, the scenario reads, you are the manager in charge, blah, 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 sign. The scope of the audit ended 31st has been limited because the chief executive officer fled the country in April 2020, taking the accounting records to him, with him. You can see. So this is a severe issue. So that's a pervasive issue, and it leads to a scope limitation, which affects substantial portion of the account, and the accounts talking about the income statements and the SFP. So the second thing, like I said, the first one is to identify the issue. Number 2 is assess the pervasiveness. Number 3 is the conclusion. You need to come up with a conclusion, speaking to the lack of sufficient appropriate evidence, which leads to a disclaimer of opinion. Then what is the action of the auditor? The auditor must try to identify which parts of the statements can be relied upon. So for example, opening balances, if they reconcile to the 2019 audited figures with 2020. So required action is the auditor needs to identify which parts of the statements he can rely on. But the conclusion is that there is lack of sufficient appropriate evidence, and this leads to a disclaimer of opinion. All right, so let's look at the second aspect. Just 2 marks. He said we should evaluate the suitability of Richard's draft extracts. So for the second part, in evaluating the Richard's draft extract, which is 2 marks, what do we write and how do we write it? So the B part, Richard's draft is generally suitable because he correctly proposed a disclaimer of opinion by stating we do not express an opinion due to the limitation of scope. He's correct. His wordings in the basis section is actually too vague and needs to mention the pervasive nature and the specific cause. And what is the cause? The missing records due to the CEOs fleeing with the records. That will help better clarify the matter. So that's what you should write. So how do you write it? State that the conclusion, which is disclaimer, is correct, but try to criticize the basis for lacking specific detail. So the detail is it must identify which records are missing and the reason for those records being missing. It should be stated in Richard's draft statement. So if you tweak that, you should get the 2 marks for that. All right, so having spoken to that, let's go to the next part of the question, where we are asked to advise if the audit opinion should be unmodified, and if so, should the report contain a material uncertainty related to a going concern paragraph. So for this part, what do we write? So, you need to advise that the opinion should be unmodified and justify this by noting the probability of success is less than correct treatment as a contingent liability, and that the matter is adequately disclosed. So disclosure is good, especially for issues around going concern matters. You need to advise that a material uncertainty related to going concern paragraph should not be included because the company has sufficient cash resources to pay the claim based on the scenario. So its ability to continue is not fundamentally uncertain. So how do you write that? You need to separate the answer into 2 parts. Number 1 is the opinion, and number 2 is the going concern paragraph write that for clarity. So that first part is just 3 marks, and the second part is 7 marks. So for the part B, talking about the form and content of modified auditor's opinion, 7 marks, which is where the examiner said students had challenge. What do you write? This part of the form and content of a modified auditor's opinion requires a direct knowledge recall of ISA 705. So a modified opinion or modified report is either a qualified or adverse or disclaimer of opinion report. It has been altered. That's what it means. It has been modified. So define what a modified report encompasses. So both opinion modifications and non-modifications or non-opinion modifications like emphasis of matter should be included in your definition. Then focus heavily on the structural changes required for the modified opinion. And there are 3 of them. Cardinally qualified opinion. Secondly, adverse opinion. Number 3 is disclaimer of opinion. So when you hear modified opinion, just know that these 3 comes to mind. So how do you write that? Use clear bullet points on that 2 main headers. So for the first one is the opinion paragraph. So let's go to the answer and see how the examiner presented it. Okay, so a modified opinion is made of the opinion paragraph. Yes, so 2 headers and the opinion paragraph. The header must change to qualified opinion and prescribe the wordings used. Secondly, the basis for modified opinion paragraph. The header must change. For example, basis for disclaimer of opinion. So list the 4 mandatory contents required in this session, and they include quantification of misstatement, reason for scope limitation, and the nature of omitted information based on the case. And that will help you provide your thoughts and apply it to the scenario to earn the 7 marks. Okay, so general strategies based on this question to be able to pick the marks seamlessly. Try to remember ISA terminologies. So terms around limitation of scope, sufficient appropriate evidence should be replete in your submission, material and pervasive nature of the case, contingent liability, material uncertainty related to going concern. So bringing some of those case scenarios and case contents into your answer is not out of place, will not be out of place. So please try to use ISA terminologies and the key precise terms in the scenario. Also, another strategy is the pervasiveness test. Don't forget, for part A, explicitly state why the missing records are pervasive. Because why is it pervasive? Because it affects a substantial part of the income statement and the balance sheet. That's why it's pervasive. Number 3 is try to contextualize your justification. So for part B of the question, justify the lack of going concern paragraph by referencing the specific facts, sufficient cash resources, and less than probability of the claim succeeding, because the company is sufficiently able to offset that issue. All right. Let's now go back to resolidify some of our understanding based on the marking key. We'll go over the concepts again. We'll use the marking key to resolidify our understanding and also revise some of these points practically. So based on the marking key now, you see that the part A, the first question, the Roman numeral 1 on forming an opinion, we have 8 marks for that. So focus on 4 points. And for those 4 points, you're going to earn 2 marks for each based on this marking guide. So the first point is that from this scenario, the missing records constitute a limitation of scope. Very simply. And that is guided by ISA 705. And that is preventing the auditor from obtaining sufficient appropriate evidence for the work. That's the first point. Number 2 is the limitation in material and pervasive, or the limitation is material and pervasive because the records are missing from early in the year, around April 2020. And this affects the entire SCI and most of the SFP movements. Number 3 is due to the pervasive limitation, the auditor cannot form an opinion requiring a disclaimer of opinion. That's what it culminates in. Number 4 is the auditor must first assess if the alternate procedures, so for example, voucher the opening balances between 2019 to 2020, checking the audit file, he needs to vouch to check and can mitigate the scope limitation, but reconstruction is likely impossible because of the missing documents that the CEO carted away with. So those 4 submissions should earn you the 8 marks. So focus on that. Now let's look at the B aspect. Sorry, the second aspect, the part A, number 2 aspect in evaluation of Richard's draft, which is 2 marks. You must state that the ultimate conclusion, which is disclaimer of opinion, speaks to thoughts around we do not express an opinion because you didn't have what to work with. So that we do not express an opinion as a disclaimer is suitable and is very correct. So in the evaluation of Richard's draft, you could state that to earn the 1st mark. Secondly, the criticism of that Richard's draft should be that the basis of opinion or his extract lacks detail and must explicitly state what records are missing and why they are missing. Why were they missing? The CEO fled with it. And clarify the pervasive nature of the limitation. So that second point should earn you the 2nd mark in that second part of the A question. Then for the part B, speaking to advice on report, which is 3 marks. The first is the opinion, and it should be modified, and it should be unmodified, and that is 1 mark. So your justification is that the claim is a contingent liability with a probability of success less than the probability of it crystallizing, and it's adequately disclosed in the note. So you pick another 1 mark for that. So the opinion should speak to an unmodified opinion and justify it by saying the claim is a contingent liability and it's covered because the company has sufficient cost and is adequately disclosed. So if you submit these 2 thoughts, you pick 2 marks for that. And for the material uncertainty going concern paragraph, that should not be included. If you state that it should not be included, you have 1 mark. And the justification around the company has sufficient cash resources to meet the claim, meaning the event does not raise significant concern about going concern ability, you get another 1 mark. So you have only 3 marks total in this part of the question. So focus on the strongest points around these thoughts. Then for the second part of the question around discussion on modified report, that's quite some marks, which is 7 marks. Now you need to define a modified report around encompassing both modifications to the opinion and non-opinion modifications like emphasis of matter or other matters. So focus on the structure for a modified opinion and you get 1 mark per point. So number 1 is the opinion paragraph. The heading changes to reflect the type of that opinion, whether it's qualified or adverse or disclaimer. Don't forget that is a modified opinion. Number 2 is the basis for modified opinion paragraphs. It replaces the standard basis section to correctly reflect the changes or the type of the opinion. Number 3, you state that this basis paragraph must describe and quantify the financial effect of the misstatement to pick the 3rd mark. The 4th mark is for scope limitation. The basis paragraph must state the reasons for the inability to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. And number 5, for misstatement of narrative disclosures, the basis must explain how the disclosures were misstated. Number 6, the basis paragraph for a qualified or adverse opinion affirms that the evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for the opinion. And lastly, the basis paragraph must state the nature of omitted information if modification is due to non-disclosure. So the discussion of a modified report based on some of these thoughts, I've provided 7 of them, should earn you the 7 marks for the second part of this big question of this B, or the B part of this question, very, very seamlessly. This is very important. All right, so that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have any questions for this typical reporting question? You may need to go through it again and just try to look at the answers and try to write down something. Don't forget, you have to be tested. You will be tested on reporting. So take note of these questions very practically. Any questions, contributions, concerns? All right, we have 15 more minutes. Let's see how to move fast on this. November 2023, question 4B, Phil PLC. I think it's quite a long read also, long scenario. Okay. So the B part of the question asks us to enumerate what you consider as the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance in Phil PLC. So don't forget, in Phil PLC, so you need to apply it to the scenario. Enumerate what you consider as the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance in Phil PLC. All right. So before we look at the answer, if you've read through the scenario, you had the questions this morning. It's a direct test of fundamental duties of the auditor and an entity's leadership. So the ISA 700 series is not tested here, but it's a reporting question because communication with those charged with governance and the responsibility of management, some of them are enshrined in a report. So the ISA that will apply here is ISA 200, talking about the overall objectives of the independent auditor. But it's also a reporting question because the scenario is a conflict between management and the auditors that makes this a highly relevant reporting question. So there's a conflict if you read through the scenario. And you generally observe from the question, if you read through the scenario, that it requires us to articulate the specific responsibilities of management and those charged with governance, which are often confused with the auditor's duties, that expectation gap. And the scenario explicitly mentions the managing director claiming preparation is the auditor's responsibility, and making the correct enumeration of this responsibility is crucial. So that clarity of expectation gap or the clarification of that expectation gap needs to be provided. We also observe from this question that we need to state that management and those charged with governance are responsible for the preparation, presentation, and control over the financial statements. And the auditor is responsible for expressing just the opinion. Very simply. And we have just 5 marks for this question. So it means we need to be clear. We need to provide single sentence descriptions, maybe 5 of them, of the key responsibilities required of both parties, the auditors and management. All right, so having said that, let's get to the nitty-gritties right now. So what do we write and how do we write such answers or our answers? Make it very brief. It's 5 marks. Don't waste much time. The core duties, if we look at the answers, it's quite simple. But then the core duties is what we should write, and we need to list the core non-auditor duties under 2 main categories, like the examiner presented. Number 1 is financial statement and control. The responsibility for the output of the financial statements and the means to create it accurately, which is internal controls, is responsibility of management. And also facilitation of the audit, cooperation, and ensuring the auditors have access to what they need. Responsibility for providing the necessary access and information to the auditor. These are 2 cardinal responsibilities of management. Financial statements and controls is a header you could use. Facilitation of the audit is the second header. And those are the core non-auditor duties that you could provide your answers on. So how do you write that? Use a clear numbered or bulleted list. So each candidate should aim for at least 5 distinct responsibilities. Try to use precise language like preparation and fair presentation, design and implementation, and maintenance of internal control. So that's how you should write. So the crucial point here is specifically mention the responsibility of prevention and detection of fraud. Based on this scenario, the case scenario, it hints a fraudulent financial reporting on the part of management. So please read through the scenario and pinpoint those very important areas to point out in answering such a question. So the answer is replete with about 4 points and 3 bullet points under the 4th point to give you the 5 marks easily. Okay, so in strategizing how to answer and end these marks, don't forget I said earlier, and I'll keep reiterating it, use ISA terminologies always. Use terms like preparation of financial statement in such a question in accordance with applicable framework, financial reporting framework, design and implementation, maintenance of internal control. So those terminologies are very important. If you don't remember ISA 200, it's fine under such exam condition, but those terms should be integrated in your answers. Avoid the auditor's rule. So ensure the points listed are not auditor's responsibilities. And the auditor's responsibilities, for example, is expressing an opinion, planning the audit. So for this answer, try to focus on another strategy is conceptual hook. What do I mean by conceptual hook? Briefly reference the scenario by noting that the management claim or management's claim of is their right is correct, but their resistance to auditor input is wrong, as they must also facilitate the audit. So that conceptual hook is very important based on the scenario. So try to reference scenario. So let's go back to the marking key now and see how to end the marks and also solidify our understanding of how to answer such a. Sorry, please pardon me. I had a long network outage. Please pardon me about that. A lot of people have left the call, I believe, because of that long outage in network. Okay, so let me round up with the last section of my thoughts. We're actually speaking to the terminologies or general strategies on how to earn the marks. And I was speaking about contextual hook. I was saying we should briefly reference the scenario by noting that management's claim that the financial statements preparation is their right, which is correct, but their resistance to the auditor's input is wrong, as the auditors must also facilitate the audit. I think that was where I was sharing my thoughts before the glitch in network. All right, so let's speak to the marking guide right now and solidify and revise some of those concepts in these answers or this question. So to secure the full marks, every candidate should cover 5 of the following essential points, ensuring each is a distinct responsibility. So number 1 is the preparation and presentation, speaking to the responsibility for presentation and fair preparation of the financial statements in accordance with the applicable financial framework is the responsibility of management. Also, the internal control framework, the responsibility for the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control, relevant to the preparation of financial statements that are free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error, are also the responsibility of management. Very importantly to take note of. Okay. Also, the third point around fraud and error, responsibility for the prevention and detection of fraud and error within the entity is also the responsibility of management or those charged with governance. Also, access to information, speaking to responsibility for providing the auditor with unrestricted access to all information, explanations, and persons, for example, employees, directors relevant to the audit, is the responsibility of management. Also, written representation. Management is responsible for providing written representation to the auditor at the end of the engagement, confirming that they have fulfilled their own responsibilities, documented in writing. And number 6 is the going concern assessment, speaking to responsibility of management for making an assessment of the entity's ability to continue as a going concern in the foreseeable future is also the responsibility of management. And I think the 7th point I'll provide is oversight. So those charged with governance role, the oversight rule, their management is responsible for oversight of the financial reporting process and also monitoring of internal controls. All right. So that's it for this question on Phil PLC, question 4B, November 2023. Okay, so our time is fast spent. We'll stop here. We've already done 2 hours. So please go through the rest of the questions, practice with it before exam day. And I believe with these techniques, you'll be able to solidify your understanding of this concept. All right, so that will be the end of this podcast today. We'll stop here and we'll see in the next